So I imagine I'm not the only person out there sick to death with modern 80s nostalgia, especially when it's made by those who didn't exactly come from the 80s. Stranger Things has a lot to answer for, but at the same time, I can't deny I wasn't initially consumed by the zeitgeist and enjoyed a fair few unique and refreshing takes on 80s nostalgia, considering some of my favourite films are, well, from the 80s. However, there is one 80s-inspired mystery thriller that seems to have gone under the radar, despite arguably being, in my opinion, one of the few to genuinely stick with me after it was over, for both better and morbidly worse. Summer of '84 tells the story of a paperboy called Davy, who after growing obsessed with conspiracies surrounding the disappearances of 13 teenage boys over the last decade, begins to suspect his neighbour Wayne Mackey is who the media call the Cape May Slayer. What ensues is Davy dragging his friends into investigating Mackey's odd and mysterious activities in the hopes of uncovering evidence of his true identity, all while contending with the reality that Davy and his friends are, well, just kids trying to enjoy their summer. Summer of '84 has an interesting structure. On the one hand, it's an eerie, sometimes bordering on sinister murder mystery that keeps you compelled to see if Davy's suspicions are correct. But on the other hand, this serious, urgent, and threatening goal is interluded by Davy and his friends simply dealing with what little time they have left of their childhood. As we dive deeper down the rabbit hole, please leave your thoughts in the comments below, and even a cheeky wee like and subscribe to help out the video. And if you want to go a step further, please consider supporting my videos on Patreon. After covering the Black Phone a few weeks back, I felt compelled to return to Summer of '84 because of how deeply rooted it is in the circumstances surrounding real-life disappearances and true crime stories, giving it an uncomfortable air of believability that stretches to the point I desperately hoped these kids would bail from their little detective game before it was too late. The big identifier of this is the milk carton advertisements of missing children, which became a phenomenon in America during the 1980s in a bid to draw daily attention to the general public, with major examples including Ethan Pates, Adam Walsh, and paperboy Johnny Gosh, none of which have led to happy endings. These unfortunate tragedies are at the macabre heart of Summer of '84. It's a film that's tonally about the liberation of the summer holidays, being free from the shackles of parental angst and school term oppression. However, this relatable, joyful sentiment is now overshadowed by a brooding presence hell-bent on destroying the very essence of innocence. Taking place entirely through the eyes of naive and precarious teenagers, we see this domestic setting as warm and inviting with no immediate sense of danger. Nothing is made to feel off or suspicious. This is just how kids see the world and their neighbourhood. It taps into that false sense of safety and security kids have, yet Davy's particularly keen interest in conspiracy theories introduces an unlikely cynicism that shatters the illusion of the summer fantasy. Basically, 80s nostalgia be damned. Summer of '84 takes off the rose-tinted glasses to focus on the growing panic behind stranger danger. It's a film that straddles a line between carefree childhood shenanigans, where boys will be boys, and the grim, violent adult stuff that they don't fully comprehend despite their own personal chaos happening in their private lives. The distinguishing detail about Davy is that he has an overactive imagination, and because of his fascination in superstitions and the oddities of the unknown, there's a stigma attached to him where people are less likely to take him seriously, despite proving himself to be wise and insightful. The problem with his obsession with Mackey is that it's triggered by insignificant, incidental, and largely innocuous details, such as seeing a random locked door in Mackey's basement when helping him move furniture, to later assuming Mackey's constant interest in gardening means he's burying bodies in his own backyard. The film constantly goes out of its way to show Davy's theories as incredibly far-fetched, as everything Mackey does can be rationally explained as being literally what it looks like. It's a bit like Fright Night, where our hero warns others greatly of the danger that lives right next door, but the horror comes from the fact that nobody believes him and makes him out to be crying wolf. I saw a bit of myself in Davy's imagination because, like with me when it comes to film, he reads far too deeply into details that just aren't there, or disproportionately takes them out of context to fit his own ludicrous narrative. As such, the film tries to play into an element of uncertainty as to whether Davy's suspicions are correct, or maybe he is just grasping at straws. Now, I will come back to that in the spoiler section because it has a very unique way it goes about its payoff, but it works even better when you apply some context behind Davy's journey. So, an odd way to compare Summer of '84 is to take any episode of South Park where the boys roleplay as detectives or businessmen and get caught up in real adult situations, and you more or less see how Davy and his friends naively perceive their activities. It's a bunch of kids pretending to be adults as if the whole thing is just a fun game, unbeknownst to them that they really are being sucked into a game of sorts that does have genuine consequences that they don't completely comprehend. It's significantly reflected off a game the kids play each week called Manhunt, where at night one group of kids hide and the other group hunts them. It's a harmless game of hide and seek, but with a very specific dramatic overtone placed upon it. Yet the difference is when the fantasy becomes a reality, you can't just hit the brakes and expect to walk away scot-free. In other words, when Davy starts investigating Mackie, he puts himself in incredibly vulnerable shoes. He has to fully commit or face the potential consequences of becoming Mackie's next victim. That's of course if Mackie is even the killer. In fact, Davy's former babysitter Nikki even warns Davy of the very consequences of harassing and stalking Mackie, especially when the more pressing detail that comes about is the casual reveal that Mackie is a fucking cop. Yep, if the idea of safety being compromised didn't sound like much, imagine when the biggest danger facing you is someone of power, authority, and influence. The true uncomfortable detail about Mackie is that he's simply just a really nice guy. He's the perfect neighbor, he's compassionate, charming, kind, and helpful. Hell, I despise the fact that he's just so nice. And the humorous irony of it is that, cynically, someone who is just too nice surely has skeletons in their closet somewhere. It's like a wolf wrapped in sheep's clothing type deal. However, what really escalates the situation is that when Davy discovers Mackie is onto him, I have never seen such a stark transition from quirky, bubbly neighbor to menacing motherfucker watching you from your window. Rich Sommer's performance is absolutely fantastic and cannot be understated. He is so good at playing sincere that I believe in his innocence, but goddamn does he have a death stare, especially with how he towers over the kids. He maintains his composure even when Davy outright accuses him. He doesn't play games with Davy or drop hints that he is the killer. He keeps up such a fierce act that briefly at one point I started thinking maybe he is harmless and has other stresses going on in his life. I say that because throughout the film there are what you could call distractions that detour Davy's investigation to place attention on the special significance of Summer. Davy narrates quite astutely about how people never show their true colours. Each of us in our own ways try to bury our burdens, and frankly, none of us will ever know what happens behind closed doors. As such, everything Davy sees is without context. He sees a future missing boy in Mackie's house and thus thinks Mackie killed him, but it's based on nothing more than the vaguest insight through a window, very much like how some of Davy's friends might look happy, but it's just them masking their own personal stresses. Later in the film, we get vague glimpses into their home lives that recontextualize what we know about them, and how Davy is technically likely the only one with a somewhat happy, comfortable life, with each kid even asking to stay at each other's houses just to get away from the compressed bubble of madness brewing in their homes. You have Tommy acting like a nonchalant tough guy who doesn't care about authority when he's actually suppressing the domestic abuse of his household and trying to escape the shadow of his criminal brother, who he seems to be taking after. Then there's Nikki's parents going through a divorce where they fight for custody, and lastly you have Woody's mother, who has become a depressed alcoholic. We don't see any of the details behind their circumstances. They all go outside the moment they can in order to feel liberated. The film is effectively a melancholic tribute to summer. It does have moments of joy and hope, but at the back of their minds is the stresses, anxieties, and uncertainties that come with growing up. So from this point, I want to go into the real gritty, ugly, horrible reason this film stuck so heavily with me. It is perhaps one of my genuinely favorite horror movie endings ever, so brace yourself. Look, for as much as the film wants to play up whether or not Mackie is the killer, let's face it, of course he's the fucking killer. But how it plays it off is absolutely bone-chilling in a way I never expected. I actually did have a brief suspicion that the movie would reveal Mackie to be innocent and play off Davy's dangerously overactive imagination, but while that would have technically fit the theme, it certainly would not have the shocking impact we get instead. Traditional film structure would have you believe that Davy would eventually find out the truth, be confronted by Mackie, and overcome him by either killing him or having Mackie get arrested. But how it approaches the final showdown doesn't give you the gratification you'd hope for. After many attempts to uncover the truth to no avail except for the discovery of a bloodied shirt of a missing child, Davy and his friends go to his parents who, not believing them, force the boys to apologize to Mackie, who claims the shirt was his nephew's, i.e. the nephew is the supposedly missing kid Davy saw in Mackie's house several days prior, who supposedly got injured during gardening. The next day, Mackie arrives at Davy's house while he's alone to prove it was his nephew by using Davy's phone to call him, but nobody answers. When Mackie leaves, Davy then dials the operator and discovers the number was Mackie's own phone, confirming his suspicions that Mackie is hiding something. To a disturbing surprise, the group later break into Mackie's mysterious room in the basement, discovering distressing photos of each victim, including the decaying corpse of one child and a malnourished survivor. Upon exiting, Davy takes one last look at Mackie's family photos, revealing that each of them were actually the victims' families, and no surprise, Davy's family photo is now on the wall too. They show the video evidence to the police and a manhunt for Mackie begins, with the police chief declaring Davy to be a hero, which was exactly what Davy aimed to achieve this entire time: hero status. However, that status doesn't come with the sense of accomplishment or satisfaction he desired. There is no catharsis in discovering the ugly truth. In fact, all it did was confirm everything he ever feared. If anything, part of him likely wishes he were truly wrong. It's an utterly deflating payoff. There's no grand, triumphant celebration or victor's welcome, just a cold, hard, matter-of-fact reality that the very worst thing has been realized. Now, the movie could have ended there and made its bleak point. Davy is left traumatized and disillusioned by what a hero is. In his words, nothing will ever be the same again. But in what is perhaps the biggest however I have ever said, Summer of '84 comes with one last psychologically scarring kick in the bollocks. As the manhunt continues, Mackie is revealed to be hiding in Davy's attic, allowing him to abduct both Davy and Woody. He takes them to a peninsula, telling them they're going to play a game of manhunt, grimly calling back to their childhood game, but now with deadly consequences. At this point, the movie does not fuck about. Both Woody and Davy go on the run, and along the way, discover the rotting corpses of Mackie's previous victims, eventually leading to Davy having his Achilles sliced, while Woody has his throat mercilessly slashed. It shows that direct separation between the lives the kids had versus the nastiness that perpetrated their home. It's unforgivingly cruel and unjust, and to really twist the knife, the reason he doesn't kill Davy is so he lives in perpetual fear of Mackie's return. If Davy says things will never be the same again, Mackie makes absolutely sure of it. In a way, Mackie technically wins. Sure, he loses his life's work, so to speak, but the fear he had over people still remains. You never do learn anything about him, because in Davy's world, that wasn't really the point. It wasn't about getting answers, it was simply proving Mackie was the killer. You could say Davy was naively like Icarus and flew too close to the sun. Mirroring Nicky's warning to Davy about consequences, Mackie even tells him that if he just left him alone, none of this would have happened, or at least not in the way that it does. Mackie then disappears, and sometime after, we bookend the film with Davy having returned back to his normal life, except again, nothing will ever be the same. Nicky leaves town with one of her parents, his surviving friends have abandoned him, and of course, the killer is still at large, with Davy forever living in Mackie's shadow until the day that he returns. Davy is left in purgatory, a fate worse than death, disconnected from his life and world that he thought he knew, disillusioned and plagued with survivor's guilt and the uncertainty of if and when it will all be over. And that concludes Summer of '84. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below, including your favorite modern 80s flick if you have one. And until next time, stay safe, stay away from your shifty neighbors, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye.